everybody. Dan Illman, Ashley Mailloux. Grade 2 stakes action at Santa Anita on Saturday. Some nice sprinters in race number 8 going 7/8 of a mile. Let's throw up the field for the Grade 2 San Carlos. And you've got one of the best sprinters in the country and maybe one of the best Calbreds in a long time. And the number 1, the Chosen Vron, all he's done is win 15 of 20. He's banked $1 million. And he's a Grade 1 winner already. He's not just your average Calbred.
He sort of banked that million in the hard way, right, Dan? Obviously, he's been in those Calbred races, so the purse money hasn't been on the line, but he really proved himself over the summer. We keep on going back to that race when he got that Grade 1, a victory on his resume in the Bing Crosby. But since then, he's won 2 of his last 3. I think he's won them pretty easily. On paper, he's the horse to beat.
He's just a cool horse. He's so versatile. It doesn't really matter distance, 2 turns or 1, whether he's on the lead or off. But I'm curious to see where Timeform US has him on their Timeform US pace projector. And they have him close to the pace. And I agree with this pace projector wholeheartedly. I think he's going to sit second. The number 2, Elwood Blues, is lightly raced, has speed. And Bob Baffert usually doesn't run in these graded stakes races with speed horses unless he's going.
Yeah, and Elwood Blues is going to stretch out from 6 furlongs to the 7/8 distance, but look at that most recent half, 44-1. I agree with this pretty much through and through. I think the Chosen Brown's going to get a nice trip just off of it, and several others will likely too, as we can kind of see here. The 5 and the 7 see through it, and Super Chief, they should be quite close to it early on.
The Chosen Vron might get a similar trip as he received in his most recent start. The California Cup Sprint against fellow statebreds on January the 13th, sat in behind the leader, eased out into the stretch, and you always had the feeling he had Brickyard Ride in his sights. He's going to go right on by to win with a 98 Beyer speed figure, and if he runs that 98 again, he's going to be real tough.
Yeah, look at his numbers down the page. In his last 5 or 6, his lowest has been a 96. So he's a very classy individual. We've seen this time and time again where he is a little pace adjustable as well. He can be really forward. He can close from off of it. I think the stalking trip suits him really well, especially in this field, Dan.
Now, while he has won off similar layoffs in the past, the weather in Southern California hasn't been, very agreeable to the training for the Chosen Vron. And he was going to run on the Tiz Now, going a 2-turn mile. This is sort of a backup plan. Does that bother you at all?
Not really. I mean, to me, he's just so proven, right? We talked about his resume. That's one thing. But the other thing is looking at the distances and the way he's been able to win. He's been able to basically win on turf, dirt, variety of distances. You're talking about more recently. He did have the win at the 6 furlong distance, but 2 starts back, 7/8 was no problem. So I just think with a classy horse like him, it's less of a concern. If he was a lightly raced younger horse, maybe it would be a concern.
Baffert has handled the number 2 Elwood Blues very conservatively thus far. He has moved him through his conditions, and now he's ready to take a crack against stakes horses. Let's watch his most recent race. This is a second-level allowance, going 3/4 of a mile. He showed good early speed. He had to work in the early part of this race, and this is a sign of a professional performance. I wouldn't say it was brilliant, but he looks tough this final 16th of a mile.
He does. He's still trying to dig deep here, and while some others are maybe making up some ground late, he does what he needs to do to get the job done. It was a little bit of a step forward from his prior effort, and I think when you compare those 2 efforts, they did go quicker in that most recent outing. He still was able to get it done, so I think it's kind of a tip of the hat in the right direction to him as well.
One of the big question marks in this race is the number 3, I'm a Gambler, who's going to start on dirt for the first time in 32 starts. He began his career overseas. Ever since being imported to North America from Mark Gladd, he's raced on turf. Reading Brad Free's race advance for this San Carlos, Mark Gladd seems to think I'm a Gambler is handling dirt, but this is a tough spot for a surface switch.
This is a really tough spot, and Mark Gladd obviously sends out another horse in here who, when you compare the 2, it's kind of day and night. But I think the big issue with I'm a Gambler is we just don't know about the dirt. He's got some works over the dirt. To me, are they flashy? No. Do they have to be? Maybe not. Maybe he can run an okay race in here, and they can figure out where to put him after the San Carlos. But when you have a horse that's never tried the dirt in 31 starts, it's really hard to suggest him here, especially kind of in those top 2 spots.
His next door neighbor in the starting gate is a Glatt trainee, the 4 Ghost of Midnight. This guy's won 5 of 6, including his most recent start. And this was a great placement for a horse that had already gone through his conditions. But because he made his debut in a $20,000 maiden claimer, he was eligible for this starter allowance race. Now, he was 3-10 on the tote, and he doesn't exactly win like a 3-10 shot, but he wins nonetheless.
He wins, and he gets the job done. He's gone off favorite in those last 3. They've all been trips to the winner's circle. And you talk about the $20,000 sort of tag at first asking. You wonder why. And part of it's maybe he was 5 years old and making it to the races and had some setbacks and they didn't know what they're working with. But just to see his progression and what he's been able to do, he's been very impressive. Now he's going to cut him back in distance from a mile to 7/8. He does have a win at 6.5 furlongs, and they went pretty snappy in there. So I think for him, with his sort of tactics, he's going to need to be going to need the pace to be hot early on to kind of, get a piece in here. Do I think he's talented enough based on what he's shown in those last couple? Yes, but I do think he's a little pace dependent.
See Through It, the number 5, is racing in career form in his 7-year-old season. He scored 2 starts back. Despite stumbling at the start, he then found a very nice position in behind a 3-ply pace duel and kept going. And then I thought he backed that race up just fine in his most recent effort, the Grade 3 Palos Verdes, where he finished third. Big City Lights and Hopkins are 2 very good sprinters in Southern California, and See Through It has been competitive with them.
He's been very competitive, was actually able to beat Hopkins 2 starts back, and we see, in his most recent performance, he's a well-met third in this field. And I just find the way he's been handled interesting. Look at his connections. He started his career on the dirt, really got turf heavy for a while. And you look at his last 4 dirt races, with the exception of the race at Los Al, which was the mixed race against Quarters. He's been very competitive. His numbers have been strong through and through. And I agree. I do think at least he got tested for class last time out. And he was able to hold his own.
About a 3-month layoff for the 6 McLaren Vale, who was last beaten by Ghost of Midnight going 2 turns. I wonder if he'll appreciate cutting back in distance. He is graded stakes place sprinting in his career. What I'm a little concerned about is that maybe he's a little pace dependent, and turning back in distance perhaps will be outrun in the early stages.
I agree. I think it's a concern for him, just knowing you look at the races at 6 furlongs. He was never really able to make much of an impact in those final stages. And I know they're a long time ago. We're talking about races over a year ago. Do you try to go back and find something that's going to be different for him? I don't mind him cutting back, but I think he's finding himself in a tough spot to do so. I just think there's horses on paper that look a little bit stronger at this time. And he's had a little bit of a layoff as well. We haven't seen him in a few months.
If you're a very forgiving handicapper, maybe you can make excuses for the 7 Super Chiefs recent races. 2 out of his last 3 were on turf. That doesn't necessarily have to be his surface, and he just didn't get away great 2 starts back when beaten by Elwood Blues. That being said, he's a Calbred that's only beaten fellow restricted competition, so this is a pretty big jump up in class.
He stole my thunder. I wish I would have seen maybe a little bit more in that race 2 back, but he had to go against open competition. It was for 4-year-olds and upward, and he only beat one other runner. He really never made an impact. And I can forgive those turf races, as you've mentioned. It's just a different surface. But his best figures, his best numbers, they've been against the Calbreds. They've been at shorter distances too, 6 and 6.5 furlongs. I don't think 7/8 is a concern for him. It's just, is he ready to kind of handle this group? I'm not sure.
Let's take a look at our top picks for the Grade 3 San Carlos. The Chosen Run, the horse to beat. Elwood Blues might be the horse to catch. Ghost of Midnight might be a good price. I wish I could only have to beat one of them, though, and not 2.
Yeah, it's tough, but I think you're going with a horse that at least he has upside, right? He's getting better, it looks like, with each and every start. He's handled every task that he's been, faced with at this point in his career. And if the pace is hot, I don't know how hot the pace will be, especially if we're talking about racing in California. I do think it will be a hot pace. Is it hot enough for him? I'm not sure. I liked him, though. I use him for second, but I can't go against the Chosen Brawn. He's just been a machine. He's a fun horse to watch, and we've talked about him. He can kind of adjust from wherever he's placed early on, and he's got the class.
And he is right now one of the best sprinters in the country. And if he keeps on rolling, I wouldn't be surprised to see him in some major races later this year. 1-4-2-6 for Ashley, 4-1-2-5 for me. The San Carlos is one of 2 stakes races at Santa Anita on Saturday. Good luck.